I would like to call to order the Village of Monee's Planning and Zoning meeting of December 20th, 2023. Let's rise for a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call, please.
Bettenhausen.
Here.
Brophy.
Here.
Cole.
Here.
Linner.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Trevino. West.
Here. All right, I need a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting of October 18th, 2023.
I'll make the motion.
I'll
second it.
Roll call, please.
Brophy.
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Linner.
Yes.
Lindstrom.
Yes.
Trevino.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Bettenhausen.
Yes. All right, open to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak regarding items on the agenda?
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I'm sorry, I'm catching my breath. I was rushing to get here. This is pertaining to the proposed changes in the ordinances regarding, primarily regarding the driveways, but I thought I'd just touch a minute on fences and stuff too. But just to keep it easier for me, I'm just going to read this if that's all right. While I can appreciate what I believe to be good intentions in addressing some of the zoning ordinances, it seems like more attention needs to be given to ensure that we don't perpetuate the likeliness that with these rules we can expect an influx of variance requests. And I use an example here, like with the fences, a prime example there is the problem that many homeowners are drawn to a corner lot as something a little nicer, but are then faced with challenges if they want a fence because of the unusual aspect of their side yard, and in some cases their backyard is also street facing, and all the obstacles that are involved in all that regulations expect their fence to be set back no closer to the street than their home. And I mean, how many times have you guys had zoning variances that come in here that's all related to fences because somebody's got a side yard that faces a road or a backyard that faces a road, and it's just like, those are the type of things. Michelle, is that you doing that to me? Sorry.
Push the button.
I don't know. It's on. Yeah, it's just not tall enough for me. You can't hear me?
No.
Sorry. I'll whatever. Anyhow, that almost certainly forces them to seek a variance when instead of the ordinance could simply be amended to address nearly every likely scenario which acceptably handles safe distance from the sidewalk and deals with visibility issues for traffic and things like that. Those are things that admittedly could have, should have been done a long time ago, and I know I'm partially responsible for some of that not getting done either, because you can only get so much done as government, I know. So I appreciate what you guys are all doing and everything, so don't take any of the, pointing the finger at myself on half of this stuff, just because I've known about some of it and whatever, but anyhow, but instead we have made a rule of the exceptions, and the exceptions then become the rule. So when different people have come in here for variance for their fences, they're not even consistent. Somebody will say, well, it's got to be 3 feet off the sidewalk. Well, somebody will have it right next to the sidewalk, or whatever the case may be. There's the little things like that, but there's reasonable aspects of all that you could actually save yourself a lot of work with the variances if we just amended the ordinances pertaining to fences as it relates to all these side yard, backyards that face the street and different things like that. On a side little anomaly, when I was looking through some of this, it's like, now I'm going to talk to my favorite arborist here for a second. I didn't realize until I actually read this and read it again, it's like, you're only allowed to have fences that are 6 foot high. Okay, we understand that, but there are other sections of the ordinance actually describe, like, in some areas where it abuts a residential area, they expect to be 8 foot or 10 foot or whatever kind of stuff, and then create a hedgerow that's tall, and all that kind of stuff. But how many of the people in town have, at one point or another, decided to plant arborvitaes? Now, I don't know, is that a hedge or is that a tree? I think it's I don't know, but Anyhow, so my point is technically, according to the ordinance, those are only supposed to be 6 foot tall. And most of those, when people buy them, they're 5 to 6 foot tall when you buy them. So I don't know how that's gonna fly, as far as some of that, and that's as it relates to somebody's side yard, or interior side yard or backyard. And I'm thinking, why does that matter? Those are things that, just to kind of look at some of these things. So as, I know Robinson's, very professional, they know their things and all that kind of stuff, but let's face it, we're not Flossmoor, we still drive pickup trucks, we park them in our driveways. Can I count how many pickup trucks are in this parking lot right now? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we're not gonna be one of those towns. We need to remember who we are when it comes to some of those things. So let me get into the driveways. Driveways are an issue for many of the homeowners in the R1 subdivisions. I know in the subdivision I live in, Chris, where you live, I'm not sure where, actually, Ron, where you live in the same subdivision, you understand. There's, the developers took the cheapest route possible when they were building these houses and putting the driveways in. They made the driveways the narrowest they could humanly make them and still get accepted for whatever reason. So if you got a 2-car garage, they made a 16-foot wide driveway and that was it. Your inside of your garage is 22 foot wide or more, and yet the driveway is only 16. That's narrow. Now, when I bought my house, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't worried about the kids driving and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, Chris, you relate, you got 2 kids that are driving at home now. And I widened my driveway. I know you widened yours. And, this is more on behalf of thinking beyond just, it doesn't affect me, frankly, at this point, because I got what I wanted, before you changed the ordinance. And Chris, you did too a little bit, but, and frankly, an extra foot on yours might have made it easier for you on some of that. It would have. I know. I've seen it. And so I think that there's something to be said about, if anything, revisit the fact that when somebody's building a house, if there's new development or whatever going on, make it a requirement that it has to be a minimum of the width of the garage. Because that makes sense. Then you have 11 foot per car, roughly, rather than 8 foot. And 8 foot is tough. Scott, I know you live over in the same area there. You got these driveways that
You get out of your car in the grass.
you either get out of the car in the grass, or God forbid,
Snow.
you park on the grass and you get a ticket for it.
Right.
And most of us, when we were buying our homes, however many years ago, we had little kids, if we had anything. And, we weren't thinking about, eventually I'm going to have a teenage driver, and then I'm going to have 2 teenage drivers. And then, and a challenge we're faced with is if we put restrictions that impede somebody's ability to have adequate parking in their own property, and then we're also requiring them to get their vehicles off the street when it snows. And how many times, Chris, I don't know about you, but you can't even park in front of your own house sometimes because the neighbors are parked there. So, we need more off-street, on our own property parking, so that that's ours, and that's guaranteed, as compared to somebody having to wander half a block down the street to find a park. This isn't Chicago, we don't have to save our spots with lawn chairs, So I'm looking at all that and I'm realizing it's like, I go to Costco or something like that, and they got these really nice wide parking spots, and they got a buffer area besides. So it's like, you got 10 foot, 11 foot or something like that. Now my kids can still manage to bang a car when they're, not paying attention, and it's like, the wind catches it, kind of thing. But when you're at home, you expect the comfort of having a little more freedom, a little more space that you can do that. I just put a driveway in. I made it 29 feet wide. Now, for me, that ended up because I got 3 cars, between my wife, myself, and my son's going to be driving here his own car soon, and my daughter as well, so that only gives me 3, but at least it's a start, it's a step in the right direction. If you put restrictions on here, people are already not so certain about how they like the school district. And at the point at which you have kids that are becoming of age to go to the high school, and they're not certain how they feel about that, and all of a sudden you're saying, no, you can't do that. It's got to be at least 5 feet off the property line. It's got to be this size only. And you're like, you know what? I've been doing a good job of making my house aesthetically pleasant and practical, and I want to look nice. I want to be proud of where I live. But if at some point we make rules they might sound okay on the surface, but we won't think about the frustrations that causes for the homeowners. I have no idea how many people that I've heard of that they went to get a building permit for a driveway, and the building department said, no, we're not going to sign it unless it's at least 3 feet off the property line, even though the ordinance didn't say that. I mean, God bless. I know everybody's trying to do their best and they have the best intentions, but we can't make up rules. You guys can. You can influence the direction of that, but I'm trying to give you information to guide you through making sure that the decisions we make aren't going to work against us. The last thing you want to have is everybody who's got a teenage kid decides they're going to move, and the next thing you know, American Homes for Rent and everybody else is buying up all these, they're all become rental properties. I don't want to move. I like my town. You know, I think you guys do too, and if we make restrictions that are prohibitive, so here's the other thing. If I were to take my 29-foot, let's say it's 28-foot, like the proposed regulation would be, and I were to move that over 5 feet, my driveway would be in the middle of my yard, in front of my house. That's not attractive. I'd invite any of you to come by and look at my house. You know, I mean, I don't have the nicest house in town. But I try to take care of it. And the reality is when you put, if you're going to say, okay, you can have a 28-foot driveway, now all of a sudden we made up this number, but it's got to be 5 feet off the property line. I mean, that just really. It's kind of like when I put a pool in my backyard. The building department at the time, this is 4 or 5 administrations ago, I've lost track, told me, oh, you can't put it where you want to put it. And it's like, why? And it's like, well, because, and they hand me some papers that the building department had manufactured. And I talked to Dan Tobel, who was the mayor at the time, and I said, Dan, the building department says I can't put my pool here, but the ordinance says that I can. He says, well, then do what the ordinance says and have a good day. That was Dan. That was awesome. That was just the way, that was the responsible thing to do. So in this, I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but we need to remember who we are. We're not Willow Springs. I think that's where you came from, Scott, isn't it? Yeah, Western Springs. We're not Flossmoor. We're a great town, but we are still in the country a little bit. We see cornfields out of our backyards and stuff like that, and we enjoy it, except for the coyotes when they, getting too rowdy. But that's kind of fun listening to them. But anyhow, I guess the point is, please be attentive to this. And I know that it was taken off the agenda for you tonight as it relates to parking trailers and whatnot in your driveway and all that. Michelle, try to help me out here. I think 12, 14 years ago, didn't we pass an ordinance that was, you can't have a trailer on the street if it's not attached to a vehicle? I think that was one that Dan.
I do recall that, yes.
Something of that sort. I don't remember if it was Tim that was mayor at the time or not, but so we've already got some restrictions out there. So you can't just leave a vehicle unattached, but if you're parking it in your driveway, and I know this doesn't directly affect you guys, but we've got a couple trustees that are listening. As long as it's registered and it's not on, we already have I think we already have an ordinance pertaining to vehicles that don't work. If you have does anybody know?
On the street?
No, in your driveway.
On the driveway, yes. So it cannot be, on lots or.
Right. So it's a non-functioning, not registered, not active, or whatever else. So, even at that, that's an option, but anyhow, so just, sorry, didn't mean to smack the microphone. Those are my thoughts. I don't know if you have any questions for me or whatever else. I just want to provide my 2 cents. I know there's a number of my neighbors saw what we were doing, loved what we were doing, and they were like, man, I want to do that too. So I said, well, they're going to change the ordinance pretty soon, I think. I don't know, but all of a sudden, 2 or 3 of my neighbors like, okay, I'm going to go get my permit too. So, who are we protecting by making these restrictions? I don't know. Because is it any less attractive? Because actually, to my opinion, it's better now than it was when I had a very poorly done landscape rock along the side. Chris, you understand what I'm talking about. You've been there. We've all pushed the limits of what we could get away with until we could actually redo it the right way. So wouldn't we rather have them do it right and make it look right. And I know some would say, well, it's going to affect the water, the storm water or something like that. It all runs to the street anyhow. It's not flooding my neighbor's yard. I go right up to the property line. He's got no problem with it at all. It's not like we're going to jump out and, parade around in his yard or anything like that, get along great with my neighbors. So, I don't know if you have any questions. Otherwise, it's just my 2 cents. Thank you, guys.
All right. Nobody had any questions or anything? All right. I would just like to make a comment that I have to agree with the driveway thing because, especially because I know that I did it myself. I can kind of understand where you don't want everyone to do it and there's no front yards, but if you're only doing it on your garage side, then, you're not really losing front yard or anything like that, green space. So I do understand that, being that I am one that, widen my driveway, and I do go up to my neighbors. I do go to my property line too, so I do agree with that. So just a thought.
My thought on that too is I've thought that from the start. The driveways have been way too narrow. I put 12-inch blocks on each side of mine just to widen it up.
We had
Because
rough
otherwise,
too.
it's like you're bang, bang, bang. As they're getting out in the grass, wintertime, and it's been
Yeah.
very difficult. Not everybody's done that, but I'm sure everybody wishes they would have a wider one.
Right.
So yeah, that needs to be applied to her.
Yeah, I do think I understand maybe not being up to the. Oh, okay, all right, well, we'll discuss it more once we open up the public hearing, okay. Sorry, I started making comments before I was supposed to. I'm slacking. All right, so we'll go into that then. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All right, roll call, please.
Culp,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Lindstrom.
Yes.
Trevino,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Bettenhausen.
Yes.
Brophy.
Yes.
Okay. So should we hear from, do you want to talk and then we'll discuss? Okay, yeah, we could just go over the changes and then
Yeah,
we
why
can
don't-
discuss.
Yep,
our
I will go over
concerns.
the changes and kind of
Okay.
the evolution on how we are here and probably kind of answer some of the moving forward. So
Okay.
first, thank you so much for having me back out here this evening. I know that we've talked about this a number of times, so I won't belabor it all, but I do want to be able to answer some of the questions. So we were back here in October, and I know that we talked almost about a year ago on this as well. Staff had reached out and asked, there was a number of requests that they had that wanted to look into. So by no means is this a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance. As you begin to move through and you see development, there's always changes that have to be made. So this started out with 1 or 2 things, and then over the course of the time, staff had asked for some additional guidance. I just in working with them, we almost said, okay, we have to pause because we want to move on because there's so many things that can be changed, and it depends on the change in growth as well as then hold your ordinances as well. So I think this is probably, and staff would be able to attest a little bit more to it and provide that this is probably one of the manys. As we look through some of the codes, we realize that there are things that need to be changed, but just in terms of trying to address the ones that were immediately, we wanted to kind of bring forth what we have. So I prepared before you the final, and in kind of the not final, but in the document mode of how it would be looking in the ordinance as well. I will start with follow through the memo. The proposed amendments relate to the stockpiling. We've talked about this as well, that this is in the M2 district only, and this is for those that are associated with either permitted uses or special uses. There are permitted uses in there that inherently by nature have stockpiles, by their nature of business are permitted. So this gives a little bit of regulation to the village is to kind of address, to ensure the enjoyment of others' properties, as well as kind of have that checks and balance of what's happening so we can kind of contain it. So there's different regulations that have on there in terms of screening, a location, and so forth. We also look for some type of a plan to understand where it is. Emergency management, as we've talked about before. Stormwater is always a big thing as well, and this would be as part of their proposal or part of their business, or if it is a special use as a permitted use or special use, you'd have to include that as well. The next item is fences. We have talked about this as there have been some items that needed to be addressed, such as the location shall not impede the flow of stormwater. That gives then, if there is that particular location, gives staff the opportunity to look at that and work with the individual property owner is there. Prohibiting those back-to-back fencing where we talked about, so you won't have them, right on top of each other, but then separating. But understand if someone wants to just enclose a small portion of their yard, it does allow for that. In terms of, chain link fencing, as well as then ensuring that the backs, the finished side is that which places public right-of-way as long as adjacent properties. The one item that we did, that staff did come back with and wanted to address a little bit more was understanding the fencing in the front yard. This is not a comprehensive in terms of the fencing, but what they were faced with is that there were fencings. When you come, you have decorative fencing, which can be closer to the property, that can be within the encroachment of the front yard. But then you have that front yard, that 30-foot front yard. And what they were saying is that permits were coming in for fencing that was 6 feet that would enclose the entire, from the front property line to the door. By looking at that to see how can you ensure that you still have that decorative aspect of it, but then making sure that we did allow for those who maybe have garbage cans on the side and so forth, because what happens is you have that garage that projects out. So this then takes in consideration of that garage that's projecting out and saying that that front fence cannot be anything forward. We did have a meeting internally with staff to address and understand what their concerns were, looked at various other communities. It is kind of unique in terms of the respect of how you would address it, but also know that it does not change the difference in terms of the ornamental fencing and so forth. And again, we have identified some other areas that still need to be addressed that we hope to address in the future. The next item would be the driveway width and location. This was actually one of the very first discussion points that did come up with staff, and that was identifying the location of kind of establishing a setback. We went through the gamut of 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet. I think the engineers were pushing more for the 10 feet for the stormwater aspect of it. That just seemed to be prohibitive. Looking at providing 5 feet is an opportunity to have that space for stormwater, and generally there's easements as well as then being able to swing the door open and still be on the property. So that's where that 5 feet came from. The intent was, is 5 feet it? No, it has to fit your community, and we did have this conversation with staff as well, but wanting to ensure that there is some mechanism where there isn't that constant pavement up to the property line continuously. When it's just one home, it may not, be as impactful, but the intent is that you want to continue to keep that green space that is there. One of the other items was relating to is, in ordinances, we really don't see a minimum width, but we do see a maximum width of the driveway. So with this is looking at it at the property line, not saying that, if we have a 28-foot, which again, we looked at that, usually a drive aisle is about 12 feet, a parking stall is 9 feet, to give you an idea. So with 24, that gives you that 12 and 12, so it's larger, so you still have that swing door open on either side. And know that as you approach the garage, it can be wider. So you can make it say that you do have, need that additional feet. You do need the additional on 2 feet on the other side. It does allow you to approach that. We did modify some of the language previously to ensure that you could, if you had the room, do go ahead and pave to the side. We are, addressing some of those items such as RV parking and so forth. So we can talk, I know you have some questions, we could talk a little bit about that. The next would be exterior lighting. We were chatting about that the last time, and identifying simple language that would ensure that, the flood lighting, that it doesn't negatively impact the neighboring properties, but also addressing things that require uplighting such as flags, addresses, and so forth. The other relates to construction standard and drive aisle widths, and this relates to that of parking lots. There have been, over the course of the time, the engineers have been putting in good practice. So this gives us the opportunity to address those items in terms of the drive aisle widths, how it is determined, as well as then for the two-way traffic to ensure. What other item that we did talk about the last was about construction standards, and your zoning ordinance actually identified construction standards for parking lot. There's actually another section of your municipal code, Title 12, which also addresses parking lot standards. So as opposed to modifying both sections, because as we know that when you do a zoning ordinance, you need to hold a public hearing and so forth, and to modify both sections consistently all the time, because pavements change, technology changes, that in terms of construction standards change, not technology, to look at it at leaving it in one section. So therefore, if there is a change, we don't have inconsistencies. So we did reflect that, and that, because it's in Title 11, does not have to hold that public hearing. So that is consistent with what was presented previously, but we will keep that in that section. The last one is also the stormwater runoff. Those items as well talk about individual bulletins that relate to stormwater and so forth. This is more of a technical cleanup that has to be done. This was based on the engineers. There's a new bulletin, used to be Bulletin 70, now it's Bulletin 75. They have been, through development, enforcing the new standard, but this gives us the opportunity to ensure that it is code. So that's in summary of the revisions. As I had noted, two things that are not included here. One is the RV. RV comes under a different section. That's where it was originally, and staff would leave it in that section. We have taken all the comments in that, and we'll continue to work with them to develop that as part of that title. I believe it's Title 6. And the other one that is not included that we previously talked about was short-term rentals. We wanted to take a pause and look at that again. It was one that, it is unique, and we have to make sure that it is pertinent to your community to address any comments, questions, and concerns that we have. So that's why that is not, and that's anticipated maybe in the near future to come back with some of these other items as well. Okay? So I can answer any questions you have. I know you brought up driveways. I know that fencing was as well a conversation piece, so I'm more than happy to kind of address those.
Yeah, I mean, if we could maybe discuss the driveway thing again. Like I said, I am one of those that did extend mine as well, and I do think that you said, like, as it gets closer to the garage, you can, like mine, I'm wider down at the street, but then as it goes past the sidewalk, then I cut up and over next to my driveway. So what would, and so it goes along the side of my house. And actually it goes all the way almost to the back of my house on the side, but it's fenced in. And then, but I am up to my property line as it gets up to my fence. But then it curves because I have, I think of some kind of drain, so I couldn't go over the drain.
Right.
So, but if I don't know if, I think that's why the width that I have and the design that I have is because of that. But would I still be allowed to have that now? Because I do go up to the property line. We're saying that now we're not allowing that, or you will up next to.
Correct. So in the way that it is written now is that driveway, as I said, we had that gamut of that range that was going on, that it could not be. So you cannot pave up to the property line.
Okay.
Now what that number is, that, as I said, engineers wanted 10. That's and then they look at the stormwater and utilities and so forth. So that's prohibitive, but correct. So you would not be able to. And last time we had shown some aerials where it's pavement to pavement. That's where kind of that concern comes in, that it may not, because what you do, your neighbor has to be able to do as well. Right. So how do you ensure that when you have that ability to have that stormwater, they'll say, but also, snow removal, access, getting out of your car, opening your door, being able to stay on your own property and not impede. Is it 5 feet? That was kind of the landing ground that we had. Could it be something like 3 feet if that's what, is more comfortable? I mean, there's outside of the stormwater, which will have easements, it's really an aesthetic decision at this in this juncture. So as we relate to the property line, we went back and forth, was 28 enough, and that's where the 14 and 14 came into play with looking at the typical drive aisles, but that would be right at the property line. And as you move towards your garage, you can make it wider. So you can have it wider to encompass. So say you have a 3-car garage, or say you have that extra need for that. But the way that it's currently written now is it can, but it can't be more than 5 feet. So and again, that ensures that there's kind of this defining line, so your whole front yard does not end up being paved, because we see as we need, we start paving this way and we start paving this way. So kind of controlling it at that streetscape by ensuring that there's that strip of green, but also then ensuring that we're keeping that separation between. So, I in terms of what that number is,
Right.
It's really an aesthetic. The idea is to ensure and protect property owners' rights, understanding that there is a need, and what should that number be? It's kind of the discretion, knowing that if there is major drainage and so forth, that would be kicked and reviewed to engineering regardless of that.
Okay. Did you want to?
Well, aesthetically, I think it's important that how this is all done as far as how the neighborhood looks. But one thing that Jay brought up, and I think that's very important, is this town is pretty much blue collar. What are we, 80% blue collar, seniors, and I'm not sure the exact number, but we got to be careful that we don't ordinance people out of town.
Right.
So that was a good point, Jay.
I would like to maybe see something visual, whether it's pictures or sketches or something that shows examples. Because
Okay.
that gives people they know more of what they're up against when they can see it rather than try to, well, wait a minute, 5 feet from where? How wide is the garage? Wait a minute, I have an 18-foot overhead door, so 16 feet doesn't quite make it. You know what I'm saying? Things
Right.
like that.
And we did have, and there was last time at the work
Yeah.
session, we did have some aerials and that showing what we were trying to address and so forth, but meaning that if you have an 18-foot garage, you can have an 18-foot wide driveway.
I don't have them.
Right, but meaning that there's nothing that's prohibiting and saying that it has to be the exact width. So if you do have that 16-foot wide garage, you can have a wider driveway. So that normally, as I heard, that there's establishing a minimum. Normally normally we don't see a minimum, particularly because even in this situation, that you'd be allowed to have a little bit more. So if there's our particulars that would not fall into this and not be able to, but this still, that 18-foot would be able to have a larger drive, provided that they have that feet on the other side.
Okay, so what I'm thinking about is, when you say it can flare out, well, I'm thinking how far, what's the distance of the flaring?
It starts with, the way that it is written is that within 20 feet of the garage.
Okay,
So within 20 feet of the garage, you can flare out to a wider than the 28. So say if you have the room, you can get to the 30 feet to do that. And that also helps with, say someone has a 2.5 car garage, or they have that extra little space where the garages itself are just not the same doors, but they have that little area there. It allows for that ability to go, but ensuring that the whole entire is not. And again, these numbers are those that we had chatted, over the course of the time. As I even said with staff, is that it's every community is different. I mean, even when we were going through the fence discussion, every community is different. We have to look at them differently. We have to look at the needs that are.
All right. At this point, so next we would make a recommendation to send this as is, or can we add in there, changes that we
Yep.
would like considered?
Correct.
Okay.
So what you could do is that if there is the consensus on a change of a proposed text, is that you would simply, the motion would say, as amended, not, because we had said as presented, so as amended, and then we will cite those sections of which you proposal your amendment to. And then what I will do is ensure, and we'll have the minutes ensure, I will coordinate with staff as a follow-up to identify those items. The report then would show that the discussion points coming out of the Plan Commission. Yep, because this is in draft form. This is what the conversations are, is to understand what that
Okay.
need is. So if there are particulars, and it sounds like we're relating mostly to the driveways right now, that would be page 9. So if there's, the A talks about the width, and B talks about the setback. If there's anything out of both of those, we could make the revisions, and I can kind of help you walk through what that motion would be. So is it more of the width at the property line 28 that is causing the heartburn and questions? Or is it more of B, which is talking about the minimum setback from the property line?
I myself would probably say B because, like, for me, if I was 5 feet away from the property line, the driveway would stop like at the middle of my gate. So for me, I think in this situation, it would be better to at least allow me to go a little bit closer to the property line, just so that it doesn't, if I've got this much fence and my driveway only goes to here, it might actually not look visually, appealing. If that makes sense.
So I guess maybe to kind of help the dialogue is that, is the path to have something? So I guess that's the first question. Is the path to have something, some minimum setback? Okay,
Right.
so I think that's first the discussion. And then it's, what is that? It sounds like 5 is not the comfort level. So what would that comfort level be? Or is it, because right now your ordinance does not have that.
Anything, right?
It does not have anything. And I think that, again, that's a village decision. I think there's a lot of things that you might want to think about as going through it and where that number is. And again, it's a number. Is it 2? Is it 2.5? Is that enough green space in between? Again, this is all then subject to making sure that we're not impeding any
Right.
engineering, any utilities and so forth, because if there's utilities in there and there's utilities when you pave over it or anything like that, the onus is on. If they have to get in there, the onus is on
Right.
the individual lot
Right.
owner, so.
Right, yeah, and that was something that, like, we knew going in.
Right.
I personally, I know this is up for a discussion with all of us, but I would think like, 2 to 2.5 would be good. Because if the other person has to do it too, then you've got 5 feet, between the two properties, if they can only go within that much. So
I would agree with that.
I think, especially in the type of, families that we are, we've got 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 cars that we've got to try to squeeze in there when it snows. So, it does make sense to give us a little more space. What do you guys think?
I live in a private community, so it doesn't affect me, sorry.
I just have a comment, and that is that we should all realize that one size is not going to fit all.
Right, is your
Okay,
microphone
so
on?
you're saying we need a starting point. At what point is that? Is that 5? 5 for me is
Sure.
too close.
Right, is your microphone on?
But that's a starting point, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's the situation on it. So that's a starting point, but I think that's what we should go with. It's off.
You want to pull it towards you?
I can be heard, right? You can hear me, right? Yeah, you can. I have a tendency to go off mic.
I got you.
Okay, but the point is, again, one size isn't gonna fit all.
Right,
All right, what this young lady is charged with is to find a size that's gonna be agreeable to the majority of the people who are gonna be here.
And correct, there is always, in a community like Monee, when we do these, we look at everywhere. We have the best opportunities now with Google views and all of that you have smaller lots, you have larger lots, you have everything. The one thing too is that we've talked about is, that maintenance. You want to make sure that you have that opportunity to go back and forth and maintain on your own yard. We all have great neighbors that let us kind of swerve on and take off of the snow or that. But going as you had mentioned, if that comfort level is a 2.5, so you have that 5 feet, that still allows you to have the opportunity, if you're cutting the lawn, if you're plowing snow, if you're opening the door, everything is still contained on your property. That could be something. But again, it is not a one size fits all.
Right.
And that's the part with zoning when we're dealing with acre lots to 7,000 square foot lots that are, just 50 feet. So it is.
right. Yeah. What's that? I know. All right, and then as far as like, I do understand what Jay was saying as well in regards to the fencing. Romy's here, right? Romy,
Yeah.
would you be able to come up here?
Sure.
And do you have some feedback for us as well?
I think Maura touched on it, but as far as, you know, you add more impervious surface. So now, you know, you don't want drainage issues we have in different parts of town. And so if you add more impervious, where's the water? So you don't want, we field calls from neighbors, hey, ever since they put this fence, ever since they done this, now I got a pool, you know, on my property. So if you go all the way to the lot line, you know, you're gonna step on that property when you get out of the car. I wouldn't want, hey, what are you doing on my property?
Right.
Would you stay on your side?
Yeah.
So I know that Mr. Farquhar, mentioned this, that, hey, I'm good with my neighbor. Well, your neighbor sells the house, somebody else comes. Now what? Now what are you gonna tell them? And then when the drainage, you know, they have problems with the drainage, they called it, okay, what do we do? Why'd you let him put the driveway? And he is correct, we did ask people when they apply for the permit, you know, be considerate to your neighbor, because A, B, C can happen, because we had this experience. So when we get the call, what do? We have an ordinance, okay, go all the way to the lot line, the 16th off.
Romy, are we assuming that the lot line is imaginary?
Well, they have to have a plat of survey.
I understand, but under normal circumstances, you don't have stakes out there delineating it, so for the most part, it's imaginary,
Well,
right?
I don't know if I call it imaginary, because they have to put the string so they know where the property is.
True, but under normal, everyday living conditions, you don't have a string going between the two lots.
Correct.
Right?
Correct,
So it is imaginary,
okay.
and is somebody going to be, watching to see that you didn't step over onto their property by 3 inches or something like that?
Well, I could tell you
mean,
stories. I could tell you a story about 3/4 off, the fence is off.
A fence, yes, I understand that.
Right.
But I'm talking about where you have, two lot lines, or I should say the lot line between two lots, and the driveways we're talking at what, 5 feet from the lot line in each direction, or 2.5 feet, right? Is what you'd rather see.
Okay,
And that 2.5 feet, and I get it, doesn't quite give you enough swing of the door where you're gonna be on your neighbor's, or you're gonna be in their airspace.
I understand.
Am I right?
Correct, and that's not the whole intent. I mean, the whole intent of this is not to ensure that we have it. The whole intent, the end addressing is to ensure the green space that you have in between, to address any drainage issues, and to ensure that you don't have pavement to pavement to pavement to pavement to pavement to pavement, where then you end up having, in some subdivisions, if you have two lots that are together, it's one continuous driveway and driveway if they're together.
I would have preferred that where I used to live. This much in between the driveways. You have no idea what a pain that was.
Right, and that's why the little bit, when you're establishing it, by not having it so small, but by establishing the minimum by the 2.5
There
would
were-
ensure that.
There was no choice. The lots were too narrow.
Correct, and I think that's why going to the the other point is that everything is
A
different.
52-foot wide lot doesn't allow too much for a driveway, house, and lot lines.
Correct.
Yeah, or I should say, you know what I'm talking about.
Correct, and that's where the difficulty is when we come to these sections such as fencing and driveways and so forth, is
Yeah,
that because they're all
setbacks.
they're all encompassing building setbacks, even the way that your ordinance is written out the same, that is for, a smaller lot is the same for the larger lot as well. So it unfortunately, zoning is not a one-size-fits-all.
Right, and I had one neighbor that I couldn't deal with, but I had a neighbor I could. So our answer to that, this much between the driveways, we put river rock between them. Perfect, now you can drive over them. When you're doing snow, it's not a problem. So, you know what I'm saying? A lot of this has to do with getting along with your neighbors and understanding that there's some give and take. And basically, I understand where Christina's coming from, because if you don't have a wide enough driveway, this creates a big problem.
Right.
You know, you worry
There
more
are-
about drainage? Well, you're going off that driveway and you're
This-
creating your own ruts.
This is not to allow to widen it, but to a certain point, because
Right.
this is the cause that we feel, come to
Yeah.
our building department and they'll say, there's no ordinance, can go to the lot line, but I got a pool over here.
So if we leave the maximum width the same though, but allow it to go a little bit closer to the
It's-
property
it's
line,
easier.
yeah, then you're still, like, as far as drainage goes, you're still only paving a certain amount. We're just allowing it to go a little bit closer.
Then the 5 feet,
Right,
correct.
because I'm just thinking, like, if other people have the same situation as I do, where they want to park next to their driveway, or next to their garage, and like, the way my house is set up, like, I have my garage, and then I have a fence on the side, and we park up to the fence. So if I could only do half of that, I might not be able to fit a vehicle in there anyway, so then it becomes pointless. But if you allow the 5 feet total between the 2 yards, then at least somebody should be able to get, depending on, how close their house is to the lot line, at least be able to park a vehicle in there. Because I'm just thinking, if I had to be 5 feet away, I don't think I would get a vehicle in there anyways. So it kind of would defeat the purpose.
Okay.
So, but if you still leave the maximum width the same, but allow it, it just shifts
Right,
it. It's
right.
not,
Yeah.
you're
So
only
it-
covering the same amount.
Correct. So it does, as it approaches, as opposed to as that approach is only 5 feet, has to be 5 feet, you would give you more room as it approaches,
Right.
still ensuring that you have that kind of that green space.
Right.
In there. And that's why we have greater setbacks, right? That's why you have those 30-foot setbacks and so forth, because you want green space in your front yard.
Right, absolutely.
Aesthetically, driving down that green space, open space feel. So there is that. So I think the 2.5 would be a good compromise between the
Right.
two. But you are going to understand you are going to have those anomalies. You most certainly are. I see it in other communities all the time where it's smaller lots and so forth. You are going to have that, regardless of what it is.
Right. All right, well, that was, I just wanted to know if you had anything
No problem.
else to
This is-
add
This is
and,
the stuff that we run into.
right, yeah,
We want to have an answer, because
absolutely,
you don't want to fix something and then create another problem.
right,
'cause
As long as you both are up there, and you mentioned parking lots. There's a parking lot on Manhattan Monee Road, we all see it every day, with a truck trailer parking there, blocking the entrance. Now, we approved a permit for them last year to put up a fence and
I remember that. I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about that.
And that permit will expire.
They were supposed to put trees up and some bushes and a
Well,
fence.
They
Now,
have not
wait a
started the
minute.
project,
No.
they asked for an extension.
They did ask, well, okay.
Okay, but
Correct.
you're talking what's on
Okay.
the north side of
Yes,
Monee, Manhattan.
yes.
That's not, it's the south side that they want to put up the fence around the repair
It's on
barn,
the
is
north
it?
side.
it was,
Is it on the north side?
yeah,
Correct.
we
Okay.
discussed the north side.
Correct.
Okay,
So they
so,
did get an extension.
all right, I feel like we're getting a little off topic, so let's,
Yeah,
I'm
I've
gonna
been
try to reel it back
thinking
in,
about that.
okay,
I must have had my paper
So-
upside down.
all right, so we're good. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything? All right, okay, so do we give you what is everyone's thoughts on
I
the,
think we should go with the 5.
with the 5, like the 2.5 on?
Yes, 2.5, I agree with that.
Okay, so if we could, do I need to take a roll call for that?
I think what you can do is that, in
I don't
terms
have
of.
Larry to ask.
I can, if I may, I can
Okay.
help.
Thank you.
That you would, your statement would be, it sounds like there's going to be a recommendation,
Mm-hmm.
that you would recommend the village board approve the proposed amendments as presented, with the exception of, and then we will tell you the section, with the exception of, one moment, please. Section 11-11-5, B1B, revising residential driveway shall maintain a minimum setback of 2.5 feet from the property line.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you for your help.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, I need a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make
Or,
that
I mean,
motion.
close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
All right, roll call, please.
Leonard,
Yes.
Lindstrom,
Yes.
Trevino,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Bettenhausen.
Yes.
Brophy,
Yes.
Culp.
Yes.
All right, can I have a favorable or unfavorable?
I'll make a favorable motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Lindstrom,
Yes.
Trevino,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Bettenhausen,
Yes,
Brophy,
Yes.
Culp,
Yes.
Leonard.
Yes.
okay. But with that, yeah, okay. All right, you got all that.
I got it.
All right. So we were told that Miss Linda McKenneth Shad was gonna table this, but I see that you're here. So are we still, did you still want to table this till the next meeting? Okay, great, okay. So I just need a motion to table their special use application to our next meeting, which should be January 17th.
I'll make the motion.
2024.
I'll second it.
All right, roll call, please.
Trevino,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Bettenhausen,
Yes.
Brophy,
Yes.
Culp,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Lindstrom.
Yes.
All right. I believe that's it. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All right, roll call, please.
West,
Yes.
Bettenhausen,
Yes.
Brophy,
Yes.
Culp,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Lindstrom,
Yes.
Trevino.
Yes.